Hi, this is a walkthrough video of the first spreadsheet scenario in the Kaplan exam kit for exams from September 2021. It's called Slick Partz. Okay, so hopefully you've got the instructions in front of you. I'm not going to flip between the instructions and the data, and hopefully this will help you follow along and rewind and practice where needed. Right, so task 1, it says on sheet 1, in column D, format the cost price data as currency. It should be formatted as euros to 2 decimal places. Right, so I'm going to highlight that whole column. I'm going to right click, format cells, and then I'm going to choose number. 2 decimal places is fine. Oh no, sorry, not number, currency. Get it right. The symbol I want is the euros 1, 2, 3 that it has told me to use. So euro 1, 2, 3. All right, so it specifically says euro 1, 2, 3. So I'm selecting that one. I've got 2 decimal places. Okay. Part B, in columns E and F, format the cost price and sales price data as currency. This is in GB pounds. So what I did there is I'm just highlighting the 2 of those, and I'm doing that by left click, holding down the left click, and then moving the mouse across. So I've highlighted those 2 columns, right click, format cells, currency, and this time I want the pounds, 2 decimal places. Okay. Rename sheet 1 as data. So I'm going to do right click down here on the name of the sheet, rename, and overtype that data. Part D, copy the data worksheet to a new workbook and name it subtotal. So these 2 sheets here are blank at the moment. So to copy the whole thing, I'm going to go to the little arrow up here, highlight the whole thing, right click, copy, go to sheet 2. I can either click in A1 or up in that corner, it doesn't make any difference. Paste. And it wants me to name it subtotals. So right click, rename subtotals. So just see where I am. Right, E. Go back to the data worksheet and set the page orientation to portrait. I'm just going to press escape to take it out of highlighting it to copy it, and then I've just clicked anywhere to get rid of the grey. So it then says set page orientation, so page layout, orientation, and I want that to portrait, and fit the data to the width of 1 page. Right, so if I go to view, page break view, you can see it's already just 1 page width. I guess I could just trim it slightly by moving that in. You can sort of just drag that. I just clicked on the left, held it down, and then use the mouse to move where I want the page break to be. If I wanted to view that, how it's going to come out, I could go to a print preview. So print, file print, page setup. I don't need to do anything else with that. Sorry, I'm just going to show you the print preview. Okay. Right, so this is my print preview here. Right, but we didn't really need to do that because we've done the instruction there with our page break view. So I'm just going to put that back to normal. So I'm in view, I'm in page break view at the moment. I'm just going to put that back to normal. Then it says save the workbook as Slick Partz. So file, save as, and then you can save it in the normal way. I'm not going to do that because I don't actually want to save this. Right, that's task 1 completed. Task 2. On the subtotals worksheet, sort the data before carrying out subtotaling. The subtotals that are needed are for model and salesperson. Right, so I'm going to highlight the whole thing by clicking up in this corner. And then I want to do a data sort. So come here. And then I first of all want to sort by model. Incidentally, it's ticked here, my data has headers because my data does have headers. Should you have done a situation where you'd only highlighted below the titles in that top row, you could unclick that and then just select how to sort by column. But it's easier here if we've got the data has headers. So we're selecting model. And then we also want to then sort by salesperson. So I'm going to go add level. And I want the salesperson. Sorting on values alphabetically is sensible, so I'm going to leave that alone and say OK. And then look what happens to my table. So I've now got model first and then in alphabetical order by salesperson. It's really important when you use the sort function that you have everything highlighted, because what you definitely don't want to do is just sort one of the columns. Otherwise, you know, everything goes a bit skew with. Right, part B, create subtotals for model summing the sales quantity. So still in the data tab, we have got a button over here for subtotal. I'm obviously on a laptop here, might look slightly sort of better spread out on a desktop, but hopefully you can find that. If at any point you can't find what you're looking for, a great tool on Excel is here. You can just say, tell me what you want to do. So if I was just to type in there that I want to do subtotals, it takes me straight there without me having to know where to find it on the menu. Right? It just takes me straight there. While I'm on the topic, another thing that you can do is use the help function on Excel. That will be available to you during the exam. Right, so anyway, let's get back to our subtotal. So at each change in the model, it's got that already, I want to sum the sales quantity. So as it happens, there's nothing to change here. I can leave these alone. I haven't got any instruction to the contrary. So if I now press OK, you can see that the system has subtotaled at each change in model. So this is the subtotal for Cat 3, and it has subtotaled the sales quantity column. If I tick some other boxes, I could have got it to subtotal perhaps the total of the cost prices or the total of the quantities over here. But this was my instruction. Then I need another subtotal. So if I go back into subtotal, this time I want to each change at salesperson. So if I come down my list, there we go. use the sum, sales quantity still, okay. You can see what that does is it puts in these additional subtotals. So for this model, Clara Fiction had this. For this model, Gordon Blair had that. If you want to tidy it up a bit, it hasn't told us to do this in this particular example. We see these little numbers over here, 1, 2, and 3. So if I was to click the number 2, it just takes me to the subtotals. If I was to go to number 1, it's a bit extreme. But if you just want those subtotals, you can click the number 2 there. And then if you want to go back, takes you to the number 3. If you want to get rid of just some of them, you can use these plus and minus buttons down the side. But it hasn't told us to do any of that here. I'm just showing you. Right, D, convert the worksheet to show formulas. Right, to show formulas, you can go into formulas, show formulas. If you couldn't find it, you could have just typed it in up here and hopefully it would have taken you there. So show formulas. And what that does is instead of having the numbers and the formatting, it shows exactly what the spreadsheet's being told to do. Set the page orientation to landscape. So back into home. Sorry, page layout, orientation, landscape, and then save the workbook. Right, task 3. On a new worksheet, so we use the third one here, name it currency conversion. Return to the data worksheet and auto filter the data. Right, so again, if we highlight the whole thing just by clicking up here and then go back into data, you've got this filter button. So if I press filter, look what happens. Everything across the top gets these little down arrows. Right, that's what it means by auto filter, because then it says in part C, filter by salesperson, Monty Video. Right, so we've got a few things for Monty Video. Remember we sorted the data, so there's a few up there for the first product, a few more down here, a few further down still. So by putting that filter on, we can click on that filter. Excuse me. If I deselect everybody, so the easiest thing to do is just click on the select all and it unticks everybody. And then I want Monty, click on Monty, say OK, and it only selects the ones that have got Monty Video in that column. That's a really handy tool with spreadsheets. Copy the result and paste it into the currency conversion website. Right, so to copy the result, I'm going to go back up into that far left corner, copy, into currency conversion. Be careful here, it's not quite at A1. So click on A1, right click, paste. Right, and it has pasted just those bits that I want. The Monty Video stuff. Return to the data worksheet and remove, I'm just going to press escape so it takes everything off and click outside the box. And now it wants me to remove the Monty Video filter. So you can see there, it's telling me it's filtered like that at present. So if I just select everybody again, it puts it back to how it was. So I've now got a copy of just the Monty part in this page called currency conversion. Task 4. On the currency conversion worksheet, insert 3 rows at the top. Right, so to select 3 rows, I would highlight the first 3 rows. I'm clicking left, holding it down and then using my mouse to select the first 3. Now let go of everything. right click, insert. And you can see that that has inserted a further 3 rows at the top as required. In cell D1, type conversion rate and make the font bold and underline the text. So if we go back home, we've got bold and we've got underline. Format D1 to be right justified. So that means they want it to be in the right hand side. So that's these buttons here, left justified. You can see there, align left, center, right justified. It's not going to make much difference here actually, but click on that. It does what we've been asked to do. Format cell E1 to number to 2 decimal places. So E1 is here. So it wants me to format to number to 2 decimal places. So I can do right click format cells like we did before, or up here I can go straight to number. But I don't know if I've got it to 2 decimal places doing it that way. So if I just go back into format cells, number 2 decimal places, I'm happy. So okay. And then it's asked me to type in there the number 0.84. Make the font bold in cells A4 to I4. A4 to I4, bold. In cells E5 to E26, so that's from here to here, create a formula that converts the content of cell D5, so all of these, to Great British pounds by multiplying by the conversion rate in cell E1. Right, so I want to basically multiply 78903 euros by 0.84, which is going to give me the figure in pounds. Pretty sure that's not the current conversion rate, but never mind. It says use absolute cell referencing, so that's quite important because watch how that works. So if I just go equals that number star that number, so incidentally any formula you have to say equals first. So if I type that in, that one is fine. But clearly I don't want to then type it in every single time. And you might think, well, that's okay, just copy down the formula. So 2 ways to copy down a formula. I could either just drag it there. I'm holding down the left mouse, clicking on it, and then dragging it. Oops, I've gone too far, undo. Or an easier way to copy down a formula is just hover over that little square until the cross goes to a black cross, and then double left click. If ever you can't see what's in your column, if you go to the line that divides one column to the next, like that, until it has that sort of arrow shape, and then double click, it makes it the required width that you need. Now, you can see immediately something's gone wrong here. And the reason something has gone wrong is because that top one's fine, yeah? It's multiplied this cell, D5, by E1. But look what happens in the next cell down. It's correctly come down to D6. I want it to multiply this new number, but it's now trying to multiply it by the contents of cell E2. It's pulling this one down as well. And we don't want it to do that. So something's gone wrong. So I'm going to delete all of that. So what I need to do instead is I need to tell the system to always look at E1 and not come down E2, A3, A4 as I move down the list. And the way to do that is something called absolute cell referencing. And the way we do that is we need to put dollar signs in front of the E and in front of the 1. So you can click and just insert them. So I could go, right, dollar sign, where are we? It's the shift and the number 4 key, and then do the same in front of the E. I could do it like that, or take that back out again. If I highlight the E1 and then press F4, it's not working on my laptop. It works on the college computers. Let me just try it with a control. No. Wait a minute. Obviously got different. Try it with function. There we go. Sorry, I've got to press function on mine. I think on the college computers you just press F4 and it does it. And you can see it put those dollar signs in automatically. Right, so now watch what happens. When I copy this down, so hover over that right hand corner till you get the plus X like that. Double click. Now that looks much more sensible. So now if we click on that second one down, you can see it's moved down D6, it's moved down to the next figure here, but it's still multiplying by the 0.84. And that's what it means by using absolute cell referencing. Right, F. The sales price is 20% more than the cost price. In cells F5 to F26, use a formula to calculate the sales price. You basically have to add 20% onto the cost price. So I think the easiest way to do that is just multiply by 1.2. So I would just go equals this cell times 1.2. And this time we don't have to worry about absolute cell referencing. Just double click and it will populate down to the bottom of that column. There are other ways to write the formulas. If ever you write a formula and it's different to what they've done in the answer, it doesn't matter as long as you've done a formula and haven't just worked it out on your calculator and typed it in. This is testing your knowledge of spreadsheet functionality, right? So you've got to use formulas and functions. Right, so that's the sales price. That was part F. Part G, copy cells A4 to I26, A4 to I26. I'm just holding the left click and sort of dragging the mouse. So I'm going to copy these. So I'm going to go right click, copy. And then it tells me to paste special into a new worksheet. So if I press this plus button, I get a new sheet. And I want paste special. I've been specifically told to do paste special. It will tell you which paste it wants you to do, I believe, so that's good. Can't find it now. To include the values and number formatting. So if you go to paste special and you hover over each of these, it sort of shows you what's going to happen. And can you see it sort of telling you, like, I can't point to the word, but it says formulas F for that one, formulas and number formatting. Right, so I'm looking for the one, I haven't found it yet. Values and number formatting, is it that? Yeah, it says to include the values and number formatting. So I think I want this one, yeah, because you can see there it said values and number formatting. So I've pasted that in there and I'm going to rename the worksheet by right clicking at the bottom, rename as profit calculation. Return to the currency conversion, press escape if you want rid of the flashing lines, click somewhere if you want rid of the shading, and show formulas. So we've done that before, formulas, show formulas. Auto fit the column width. So I've shown you this already, but if I want to do all of them, if I left click and highlight across all of my columns like so, and then I come to this divide between I and J. I suspect it'll work with any of them, but I'm just going to come here because it's the end. Double click. You can see that it has just made all of the columns exactly the width that they need to be. Could have gone along and clicked every one individually, but that would have been a bit painful. Set the page orientation to landscape. page layout, orientation, landscape, and save your workbook. Right, task 5. On the profit calculation worksheet, in cells, again, sorry, I'm just going to escape and then click so as it goes back to white. So in cells J1, K1 and L1, so J1, K1 and L1, it wants me to put some new headings: total cost, total revenue and profit. And it wants us to make all the column heading bold. I'm going to assume that means all of them. So actually, I'm just going to click on the number 1 there, so that even if I added anything else, it would still come out as bold. Home, bold. There we go. In cell J2 to J23, so this column J, create a formula that calculates the total cost. So this is going to, it tells us in brackets, right? There's no assumed knowledge in this exam. It is spreadsheet skills only. So we want to do the cost price in pounds. So that's column E, multiplied by the sales quantity. I'm just going to, it hasn't told me to do this, but I'm just going to make these all the required width for the headings by doing that thing that I just showed you a minute ago, so as I can read the headings better. Right, so total cost is going to be equals the cost price multiplied by the sales quantity. So star the sales quantity. You can see what the system's doing. It's quite handy. It shows you exactly which cells you're using. Enter. And again, I'm just going to copy that down. I don't need to worry about absolute cell referencing. When you get these hashes, it just means the column isn't wide enough. So go back up here, double click, and it will make it wide enough to see the figures. Right, in cells K, so this is the K column, create a formula that calculates the total revenue, sales price multiplied by sales quantity. So equals sales price multiplied by sales quantity, and then double click to copy it down. So that's the K column. In the L column, create a formula to calculate profit, which is total revenue minus total cost. So equals revenue minus cost. Copy it down. Again, if you can't see it all, just double click on the cell divide and it will make it wide enough. Right, in cells J25, so J25 is here. Use a function to calculate the average cost, average revenue, and average profit. Add the heading averages to cell I25. So write the heading averages in there, and then it specifically says use a function. Right, so everything we've done so far is a formula because it's equals something times something, for example. Excel has a number of functions in it. One way to get to them is using this insert function button. So I just click on that to show you. So if I want, it says search for a function. So I'm going to say I want something to give me the average. This is saying most recently used. So you could put all in there, but obviously it gets a bit clogged up. But I'm going to look for average. So go. Oh, there we go. So it's found me the average. So it tells you returns the average arithmetic mean of its arguments. Arguments is just all the component figures that you put in, which can be numbers, names, arrays, or references that contain numbers. That sounds like what I want, so I'm going to say OK. And then if I use it like following in this function button that I showed you, so it says, well, what do you want to average? Right, so Excel is guessing that I want to average J2 to J24, which is exactly what I want to do. So happy days, I can just press OK and it will work it out for me. And then if I want to pull that across to the others, click on it, you can see I've got an average of K2 to K24. I'm just looking up there to show me what I've done. And then the same down here. Oops, sorry. Then the last one is the average of L2 to L24. Right, if you don't want to use that FX button to get to the functions, if you just start typing equals average, it will give you a clue that way. So let's see what's coming next. Actually, I'll just show you what I mean with that one. So let me just take that one out for a minute. So if I hadn't used the FX, I could have just gone equals. If I knew the function, I could say average, open bracket, and then it tells me what you've got to do in bold. So it's saying put the numbers in. So if I was to highlight everything that I'd want to average, close the bracket, enter, it gives me the same result. All right, so just two different ways of using the function. Now the great thing about that is if you're not sure what the function is, you can use that FX search function to try and find it. So if we go over the page, task F, in cells J26 to L26, use a function, so again we need a function, to calculate the largest number. Add the heading largest in cell I26. Right, so I might think, oh, I know, the function's going to be large. So returns the kth largest value in a data set, for example, the 5th largest number. So I could use this to find the largest number. So I could say, right, out of this set here, and you can see hopefully down the bottom it's got array there in bold. So I've just told it which numbers to look at. You put in a comma when you're using a function, and then it says k. So remember it was returning k, where k is which number do you want. So I want the largest. So I'm thinking if I put in a number 1 there, close the bracket, it should give me the largest number, 178,854. That looks about right up there, yeah? Another way I could have done it is, let me just get rid of that for a second. I could have used my FX button. So I want the largest, right? So that's the kind of clue I had. So let's not go to most recently used. Let's pick on all of them. So it's giving me ones I could use. Returns the kth largest value. So I just demonstrated that. Max A returns the largest value in a set of values. That would be a good one, max A. Or max returns the largest value in a set of values. So I could equally well have used that one, but the numbers I want to choose from would have been all of these. All right, and oops, sorry, I just come up there. You can see that has actually had the effect of keeping the formatting. It doesn't matter, you could have used the other one and then just changed the formatting afterwards. Right, so drag that across. That's that one done. Incidentally, I've never used the largest formula before, the function rather, but my knowledge of Excel means that I can find it and sort of intuitively sort of follow the instructions on the screen. So let's see if it works for part G. In cells J27, use a function to calculate the smallest number. So we want smallest. So again, we could we could use our function thing here. So we want the smallest. So let's go to all, search for a function that does that. So small sounds like a good idea. Returns the kth smallest value, or we've got min, which might give us the better formatting. So I'm going to go with that one, I think. It's guessing I want J25 to J26. No, I don't. I want to find the minimum number of all this lot. So you just highlight it and it replaces it there. And then OK. And it's found as the smallest number. And again, we can just copy that across by dragging the formula, or rather dragging the function across. Right, show formulas and auto fit column widths. So show formulas, we're getting good at this now. So formulas, show formulas, column widths, highlight all the ones that are in play, and then double click on the divide. Right, when you look at the answer, they might have used a different function. Doesn't matter because the function you have used works. It's the same with formulas. All that they don't want to see is a bunch of numbers being typed in. So I've worked it out and I've just typed in the numbers. Right, so we've done that. Set the page orientation to landscape. I think they would know that we could do this by now, wouldn't you? Landscape. Move the page break to the left of column I. Right, so the left of column I. So I want the page break to be between H and I. So the way to do that is if we go insert and then no, I can't see it. I thought it was in there. Right, sorry, page layout. Sorry, try that instead. Page layout, breaks, insert page break while I've highlighted column I. So insert page break. Now, how do I check and see if that's worked? Remember, we can go to view, page break view, and it shows us that we've got that divide to the left of column I. If it turned out in the wrong place, you can just use this arrow to drag it around on that screen. Right, and then go back to the normal view and save. Right, task 6. On the data worksheet, using the data, create a pivot table in a new worksheet that shows the quantity of each individual model sold by each salesperson. The model should be the columns and the salesperson the rows. Right, so what we're going to do, we are going to highlight everything. So we're in the data page. We're going to go insert, and it's just told us at this point to put a pivot table. I can see in part D that it wants a chart as well. So usually it tells you both at the same time, so you can just go there and insert a pivot chart and a pivot table. But I'm going to follow the instructions, so just put in the pivot table. Now, I have highlighted everything, so it's telling me that the table range is on the data page and it is A through to I. So that looks okay. I want it on a new worksheet. I was told to do that. So if I click OK, it gives me this. Now sometimes it guesses what it thinks you want, but it hasn't here. We need to tick the criteria that we want to be included in a pivot table. So a pivot table is just trying to make sense of a large amount of data held in an Excel worksheet. So what have we got here? So it says that shows the quantity, so I tick quantity, of each individual model, click model, sold by each salesperson. Now, at the moment, this looks like a load of rubbish. And it then says The model should be the columns. So model should be the columns. Can you see I'm dragging that word there, model to columns? This still looks like a load of rubbish, actually. I think I've gone wrong somewhere. So I'm just going to back up. Bear with me a minute. I think I know what I did. I think I highlighted the whole thing. I'm just going to delete that and start again with the pivot table. Sorry. Right, so I'm going to highlight just the table this time, not the whole worksheet. So I'm just going to highlight that lot. Okay, let's try again. So insert pivot table, data range, new worksheet. Okay, tick the boxes. That's what we had, wasn't it? Yeah, this looks better. So my apologies for that mistake. So it then tells us that we want the model should be the columns. So if we drag model to where it says columns, hopefully you can see that that is pretty sensible data. It's giving us the models by salespeople, giving us numerical summaries. Right, rename the worksheet pivot. Right click, rename, pivot, and move it to the right of the profit calculation sheet. So here's the profit calculation. If I click on the pivot and, oops, hang on. If I click on the pivot one, you can see I'm now holding down the left, just moving it with the mouse, and I've moved it to the right of profit calculation. It then says remove grand totals for rows and columns. So it wants me to get rid of those grand totals. You might think, oh, that's easy, just delete the. It won't let you because it's a pivot table. So what you have to do is right click in the pivot table and go to pivot table options. So there's various things you can do here, so it's worth a little explore. But the one that we want, totals and filters. So we don't want to show the grand totals for either the rows or the columns, so we untick those boxes. And then you can see they disappear. Right, next bit. Create a pivot chart and locate it on the pivot worksheet. So on this same worksheet, I want a pivot chart, and they're telling me it's to be a clustered column chart, and I have to insert a title. Right, so if I go back to insert, pivot table's done. If I come over here to pivot chart and click on pivot chart, it gives me this insert chart, and this is great because it tells me this is a clustered column as opposed to a stacked column or a 100% stacked column, etc. So choose the clustered column, and it's put this in here. Now it's overlapping a little bit at the moment, so I'm just going to move it slightly so that I can still see my pivot table. So that's basically showing me different models by my different salespeople. Right, so it wants a title, sales quantity. So the way to do that is there's a plus button here, chart elements. So add, we want to add a chart title. We've got options, it hasn't specified where to put it, so that looks good to me. And then we just overtype that with sales quantity. Add customer as a filter. Right, so if I go back, if I click on here again, it brings up my menu. So to add customer as a filter, I just find customer, which is here. I don't tick it, I drag it into the filter box. So dragging it by left click and then dragging it with the mouse. So that has the effect of adding this customer filter. So if, for example, I was going to choose customer 1, it would give me the data. You can see everything changes. For customer 2, gives you the information, or you just go back to all, which is everything, and save the workbook. Right, task 7. So this is the final task for this scenario. On a new worksheet, add a new sheet, name it product lookup. In cell A2, type product code. In cell A6, type inventory levels. And in cell A9, type sales quantity. Fit the contents to the cell. Double click on the divider. In cell B2, let's make this a bit bigger for this one because you can see a little bit better. So in cell B2, create a list of product codes from the data worksheet using data validation. Right, okay, so what that wants me to do is have it so that in this cell I am only able to put in these product codes from the data worksheet. So the way I do that is data validation, and I'm going to allow that list of numbers. So these are my choices, so I want to choose list from this drop down menu, and this is quite a common one. So the list, and what list? So we have to tell it which list. So if we click on this source button, go to the data tab, highlight all the options, and then click on that back again. So it brings us back to our data validation. So it's told us this is your source of data. This is what can be in the list. Sometimes it asks you to put messages to come up if someone tries to type in the wrong thing. We haven't been asked to do that here. So I'll just press OK. And now when I come back here, look, there's this little arrow and it gives me a choice of all those items, which is what I want. In cell B, oh no, wait a minute, sorry, missed a bit. Pick the product code WM4369. So go to my drop down and I'm picking, in fact, it's the first one, 4369. Part D. In cell B6, create a VLOOKUP to look up the product code in cell B2. So we want to look up this code on the data worksheet and return the quantity. Right, so what this wants, this is what we're sort of trying to achieve. We want the computer to look up whatever's in here on the data worksheet, which is obviously here. I'm just trying to go back up to the top. So if we looked up WM4369, and we want the system to tell us that we've got 19 of those. Right, and we want to be able to change that product code and it tell us the corresponding number, right? So we're using a VLOOKUP. V stands for vertical. If it's an HLOOKUP, it just means the data is presented horizontally. Very rarely do you get an HLOOKUP that I've ever seen on these examples. Right, so B6 here, use a VLOOKUP. So let's use the function thing again because it gives us a bit more of a clue. So VLOOKUP, go. Yeah, there we are, VLOOKUP. Right, so the lookup value is B2, right? We want to look up that. The table array is, where do we want to look it up? Well, we want to look it up. So we want to look it up here. So we've got to include the product codes. And we want it to tell us the quantity. So we need at least those 2 columns. If you did more, it wouldn't matter. There was a quick way of highlighting things, but there we go. And then click back on here. So it's now filled in the table array. The column index number relates to, in the data, so the product codes that we highlighted this bit, didn't we? So the product code is column 1, because it's the first column we highlighted, and the quantity that we want to return is in column 2. So the column index number is column 2. And then the range lookup, there's a choice here. It says here is a logical value to find the closest match in the first column, say true. And if you want an exact match, you have to say false. Well, we want an exact match because I want it to find that exact product code. I don't want any near misses. So I can then say OK. And you can see that it's told me that the answer must be 19, which it is. Now, if I went to the next one, just remember this. So I'm going to go to the next one down, 4368, and the quantity is 32. So I'm just going to test it to see if it works. So if I change that, my VLOOKUP changes that to 32. Okay. So I think probably using that FX button is a little bit easier than the alternative. I'll show you the alternative just now quickly. So the alternative would be to just type in VLOOKUP in here, open a bracket, and then use what's shown in bold in the bracket. So lookup value, put in your comma, your table array would be there. So it's the same thing, it's just how it's presented. You've got to choose which one you prefer. Comma, we want the second column, comma, we want false, close bracket, enter. Right, gives you the same result. I'll just put it back to the one it asked me to do. So that's VLOOKUP. In cell B9, create a VLOOKUP to look up the product code and return the sales quantity. Right, so we're going to do the same again, but this time we want the sales quantity. So I want to look up the same product. This time the table array needs to include the sales quantity. So the sales quantity is way over here. So I want it to look up that, but I'm going to have to pick up sales quantity. So I'm going to highlight all of that as my reference data. Okay, click back on there. Now, what column index number is it? So you count from the one you're looking up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I want the 8th column and I want it to be an exact match. All right, so that's my VLOOKUP for the sales quantity. In cell B12, use an if function that produces the word reorder if the value in cell B9 is greater than the value in B6. Right, so that makes sense because what I'm basically saying is if I'm selling more than I've got, I need to get some more. Right, but we've got to use an if function to give us the word reorder if this is the case. So I'm going to go equals if, open bracket. That's one way I can get to a function. Or we can use the fx button. You can see ifs on my list already. So if I double click on that, it gives me this box to fill in, which many people will find easier. So the logical test for this is, so if cell B9 is greater, so the little arrow, B6, so that's my test. If that's true, I want the system to say reorder. Now, if you want it to say something, you've got to put it in double speech marks. Yeah, so it's shift number 2, the speech marks. If it's false, I don't want it to do anything, so I can just leave that blank. And now if I press OK, you can see here, because 28 is bigger than 19, it's saying reorder. So let's play with it a bit. So if I find one where, oh, they're all probably going to be reorder, aren't they? Oh, they will reorder. I was hoping I'd find one where we had, no, I'm not going to find an example very easily, right? But I was just going to try and show you that if I ended up with a situation where the inventory was higher than the sales quantity, then it wouldn't say reorder. Maybe you can find one for yourself. Right, so next bit, in cell C12 here, use an if function that calculates the difference between the inventory levels and the sales quantity if reorder appears, but leaves it blank if not. So we're using the system here to say, right, if we do need to reorder, how many? If we don't need to reorder, just leave it. Right, so another if statement. So we'll use this. So the test is if cell B12 says, so equals reorder. Now be careful that you type that in exactly the same. Right, if you used a small r or something, it wouldn't work. So if B12 says reorder, then we need to calculate the difference between B9, so B9 subtract B6. And if it's false, do nothing. All right, so reorder 9, which is correct. It's the difference between those two. Right, set it to landscape and save. And that completes scenario 1.